A millionaire felt ill at the restaurant and the homeless man saved her life. But 2 hours later, everyone was horrified. The New York City night sparkled with the lights of skyscrapers and the buzz of nightlife. In the exclusive restaurant, the Golden Pearl, located on the 50th floor of a luxurious building on Fifth Avenue, Victoria Morgan, a 35-year-old woman and heiress to a pharmaceutical empire, was dining with her younger brother, Ryan Victoria, with her jet-black hair pulled back in an elegant bun and a designer dress accentuating her slender figure, looked out the panoramic window, admiring the city lights stretching to the horizon. Ryan, a handsome 32-year-old man in a tailored suit, observed his sister with a mixture of admiration and something darker, hiding behind his hazel eyes. "So, Victoria," Ryan began, raising his glass of red wine, "have you thought about my proposal to expand the company to South America?" Victoria sighed, putting her fork down on the salad plate she had barely touched. "Ryan, we've talked about this. I don't think it's the right time for such a risky expansion. Dad trusts my judgment to run the company and—" "And what about me?" Ryan interrupted, his voice tinged with bitterness. "Doesn't he trust me? Don't I deserve a say in the decisions of the family business?" "Of course you do, brother," Victoria replied softly, reaching out to touch Ryan's hand. "But you know Dad has always been very cautious with business. We need more time to study the market," and Ryan abruptly withdrew his hand. "Time is what we least have, Victoria. The competition is catching up, and if we don't act now, we'll lose our edge." The tension between the siblings was palpable. Victoria took a sip of her white wine, hoping the alcohol would calm her nerves. She didn't like arguing with Ryan, but lately it seemed they couldn't have a conversation without it ending in disagreement. Meanwhile, on the street in front of the luxurious building, a man in his 60s, dressed in worn clothes and a tattered coat, stopped to rest. His name was Ernest Vaughn, although no one had called him that in years. To the few who noticed him, he was simply the old man from the park, just another homeless person in the big city. Ernest looked up, observing the restaurant lights high up in the building. His eyes, still bright despite the wrinkles surrounding them, reflected a mixture of nostalgia and resignation. In another life, he had been a respected doctor specializing in traditional medicine, but that was before a series of personal tragedies led him to the streets. Back in the restaurant, Victoria began to feel strange cold sweat ran down her forehead, and she felt a tingling in her throat. "Are you all right?" Ryan asked, his voice tinged with concern. I don't know," Victoria replied, her voice choked. "I feel weird." Suddenly, Victoria brought her hands to her throat, her eyes wide with panic. She couldn't breathe. Her body convulsed, and she fell from the chair to the horrified gaze of the other diners. "Help!" Ryan shouted, jumping to his feet. "My sister needs help." Chaos erupted in the restaurant. Waiters ran from side to side. Customers moved away, frightened. Someone shouted to call an ambulance. Amidst the confusion, Ryan knelt beside his sister, holding her hand. "Hang on, Victoria," he whispered, his voice trembling. "Please, hang on." As Victoria's life hung by a thread, no one could imagine that the events of that night would trigger a series of events that would forever change the lives of all involved. Fate had set its gears in motion, and the truth, hidden under layers of lies and deceptions, waited patiently to be revealed. The chaos at the Golden Pearl intensified with each passing second. Victoria lay on the floor, her body convulsing as she struggled to breathe. The other diners watched in horror, some covering their mouths with their hands, others screaming for help. Ryan, kneeling beside his sister, shouted desperately, "Someone do something, please, she's dying!" At that moment, as if fate had heard his plea, the restaurant doors burst open. Ernest Vaughn, the homeless man who moments before had been observing the building from the street, came running in, his eyes full of determination, quickly scanned the scene until they fixed on Victoria. "Move aside," he shouted in a voice that left no room for doubt. "I'm a doctor." The crowd, surprised by the appearance of this disheveled man, instinctively moved aside. Ernest knelt beside Victoria, ignoring the distrustful looks and murmurs around him. With quick and precise movements, Ernest examined Victoria. "She's suffering a severe allergic reaction," he muttered to himself. Then, raising his voice, he asked, "Does anyone have a pen? I need a pen right now." A waiter, snapping out of his stupor, quickly handed him one. Ernest skillfully disassembled it, keeping only the hollow plastic tube. With a calmness that contrasted with the general panic, he made an incision in Victoria's throat and inserted the tube. "What are you doing?" Ryan shouted, horrified. "Saving your sister's life," Ernest replied without taking his eyes off his task. "He's performing an emergency tracheotomy." Miraculously, Victoria began to breathe again. Her color gradually returned and the convulsions ceased. Ernest monitored her vital signs with the experience of years of medical practice. "She'll be fine," he finally announced, prompting a collective sigh of relief in the restaurant. "But she needs immediate medical attention. The ambulance should arrive any moment." As if his words had been a signal, the sound of sirens filled the air. Moments later, paramedics burst into the restaurant, taking control of the situation. As the paramedics attended to Victoria and prepared her for transport, Ryan approached Ernest, who had discreetly stepped aside. I don't know how to thank you," Ryan began, his voice trembling with emotion. "You saved my sister's life." Ernest simply nodded, a small smile curving his chapped lips. "There's nothing to thank me for, young man. It's what any doctor would have done." "Doctor?" Ryan looked at him confused, observing his worn clothes and disheveled appearance. Before Ernest could respond, 2 police officers entered the restaurant. They headed straight for them, their faces serious and determined. "Are you the man who attended to Ms. Morgan?" one of the officers asked Ernest. "I am," Ernest replied calmly. "We're going to need you to come with us to the station to answer some questions," said the other officer, his tone leaving no room for discussion. "But why?" Ryan intervened, bewildered. "This man just saved my sister's life." The first officer looked at Ryan seriously. "Mr. Morgan, your sister has just suffered an attempted poisoning. Everyone present in the restaurant is a potential suspect, especially someone who appeared out of nowhere at the precise moment." Ernest didn't protest as the officers handcuffed him. His face remained impassive, as if he had expected this turn of events as they led him. Out of the restaurant, Ernest looked back one last time. His eyes met Ryan's, who watched him with a mixture of gratitude and confusion. For a brief instant, something seemed to pass between them, an inexplicable connection. Then the elevator doors closed, taking Ernest away and leaving behind a restaurant plunged into chaos and uncertainty. No one could imagine at that moment how the lives of Victoria, Ryan and Ernest would intertwine in the coming days, nor the secrets that would come to light as a consequence of this fateful night. As the ambulance drove away with Victoria on board and Ernest was taken to the police station, Ryan was left alone in the middle of the restaurant, his mind spinning with unanswered questions. Who would want to poison his sister? And who was this mysterious savior, really? The night, which had begun as a simple dinner between siblings, had become the beginning of a mystery that would shake the foundations of the Morgan family and reveal long-buried truths. New York Presbyterian Hospital buzzed with activity when Victoria Morgan was admitted for emergency care. The doctors worked tirelessly to stabilize her, marveling at the emergency tracheotomy that had saved her life. Meanwhile, at the downtown police station, Ernest Vaughn sat in front of 2 detectives, his hands still handcuffed. Detective Charles Ramirez, a stocky middle-aged man with a bushy mustache, looked at him suspiciously. "So, Mr. Vaughn," Ramirez began, "would you like to explain how a homeless man turns out to be a doctor capable of performing an emergency tracheotomy?" Ernest sighed, his tired eyes scanning the interrogation room. "Life takes many turns, Detective. Years ago, I was a respected doctor specializing in traditional medicine, but that was before..." "Before what?" pressed Detective Anna Smith, a young woman with a sharp gaze. "Before I lost everything," Ernest replied quietly. "My wife died of cancer. My children drifted away, and little by little I sank, but I never forgot my Hippocratic oath." The detectives exchanged glances. The story seemed sincere, but something didn't add up. And how do you explain your presence at the restaurant at the exact moment of the poisoning? Ramirez asked. Ernest straightened in his chair. I was on the street as always. I heard the screams and went up. It was pure coincidence. A very convenient coincidence, Smith muttered. While the interrogation continued at the hospital, Ryan Morgan anxiously awaited news about his sister. His phone wouldn't stop ringing. Calls from his father, from the company's board of directors, from journalists hungry for information. Finally, a doctor approached him. Mr. Morgan, your sister is stable. We've identified the agent causing the allergic reaction. It's a very rare substance, derived from a tropical plant. Ryan paled. A tropical plant? But that's impossible. Victoria has never shown allergies. Sometimes allergies can develop suddenly, the doctor explained. The important thing is that your sister is out of danger. You can see her now. In the hospital room, Victoria lay in bed, her skin still pale but her eyes open and alert. Seeing Ryan, she tried to smile, but the tracheotomy prevented it. Oh, Vic, Ryan whispered, taking her hand. I thought I was losing you. Victoria squeezed his hand weakly and pointed to a notebook on the bedside table. Ryan brought it closer, and she wrote in shaky handwriting, Where is the man who saved me? Ryan's face darkened. The police took him. They think he might be involved in your poisoning. Victoria's eyes opened in surprise and she shook her head vigorously. She quickly wrote, It wasn't him, I'm sure. Help him. Ryan frowned. Vic, we don't know anything about this man. How can you be so sure? Victoria wrote again, Trust me. Hire the best private detective investigate. Meanwhile, in the luxurious Morgan mansion, Edward Morgan, the family patriarch, paced back and forth in his study. At 65, he was still an imposing man, with silver hair and penetrating eyes that had intimidated competitors for decades. His personal secretary, Lucy Foster, watched him with concern. Mr. Morgan, are you sure you don't want to go to the hospital? Edward stopped, looking out the window at the moonlit gardens. No, Lucy, I can't let them see me like this. The press would be all over us in an instant. Lucy nodded, understanding the need to maintain the family's public image. I understand, sir. Do you want me to schedule a press conference for tomorrow? Yes, do it, Edward replied, turning to her. And Lucy, I need you to do something else for me. Something discreet. The secretary approached, intrigued. Of course, sir, anything. Edward lowered his voice despite being alone in the study. I need you to investigate Ryan, his movements over the last few weeks, his expenses, his contacts. Everything. Lucy couldn't hide her surprise. Your own son, sir? Especially my son, Edward replied, his voice laden with an emotion Lucy couldn't identify. There's something that doesn't add up in all of this, and I need to know the truth. Meanwhile, at the police station, Ernest's interrogation continued. Detective Ramirez slammed the table in frustration. Come on, Vaughn. We know you have medical knowledge. How can we be sure? You didn't use that knowledge to poison Ms. Morgan and then play the hero? Ernest remained calm, his voice tired but firm. Detective, I've spent the last few years of my life on the streets. Where do you think I could have gotten such a sophisticated poison from? Besides, why would I risk my freedom for someone I don't even know? Detective Smith, who had been observing silently, intervened. Mr. Vaughn, we've found traces of a suspicious substance on your clothes. Can you explain that? For the first time, Ernest seemed genuinely surprised. A substance? I have no idea what you're talking about. The only thing I carry with me are some medicinal herbs I use to treat my own ailments. That's what the analyses will determine, Smith replied dryly. Meanwhile, you'll have to stay with us. At the hospital, Ryan was leaving Victoria's room, his mind spinning his sister's. Insistence on the homeless man's innocence puzzled him. He took out his phone and searched his contacts until he found the number he was looking for. Hello? Detective Megan Ortiz? This is Ryan Morgan. I need your services urgently. It's about the attempted poisoning of my sister. On the other end of the line, a professional female voice responded, Mr. Morgan, I'm aware of the situation. News travels fast. How can I help you? Ryan looked around, making sure no one was listening. I need you to thoroughly investigate a man. A homeless man who saved my sister's life but is now being held as a suspect. My sister believes he's innocent. but I'm not so sure. I understand, Megan replied. Anything else I should know? Ryan hesitated for a moment. Yes, I also want you to investigate everyone who was at the restaurant that night, including me. There was a brief silence on the other end of the line. Are you sure, Mr. Morgan? That could raise unnecessary suspicions. I'm sure, Ryan affirmed. I want the truth, Detective Ortiz, whatever it costs. As Ryan hung up the phone, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was opening a Pandora's box. Family secrets, long buried, threatened to surface in her luxurious office in downtown New York. Detective Megan Ortiz, a woman in her 40s with piercing green eyes and brown hair, pulled back in a professional bun, hung up the phone and leaned back in her chair. The Morgan case promised to be one of the most intriguing of her career. She opened her laptop and began typing, searching for information about the Morgan family and the mysterious homeless man. As she delved into her investigation, a network of unexpected connections began to emerge. Well, she muttered to herself, her eyes quickly scanning the screen. It seems the Morgan family has more secrets than I imagined. As the night progressed, the different threads of the story began to intertwine. In the Morgan mansion, at the hospital, at the police station, and in Detective Ortiz's office, the pieces of a much bigger puzzle than anyone imagined were starting to take shape. And somewhere in the city, hidden in the shadows, someone was watching how events unfolded, knowing that soon they would have to make their next move. The following morning dawned grey and rainy in New York City, as if the weather reflected the tension hovering over the Morgan family. At New York Presbyterian Hospital, Victoria woke from a restless sleep, the effects of the sedatives slowly dissipating. Beside her, Ryan dozed in an uncomfortable plastic chair. He had spent the entire night by his sister's side, refusing to leave her alone. Victoria observed him. For a moment, a mixture of affection and concern in her gaze. Then, careful not to wake her brother, she took the notebook from the bedside table and began to write. Meanwhile, at the police station, Ernest Vaughn was waking up in a detention cell. He had spent an uncomfortable night, but his face showed surprising serenity for someone in his situation. When an officer approached to bring him breakfast, Ernest looked at him with a tired smile. "Good morning, officer," he greeted courteously. "Any news about my case?" The officer, surprised by the detainee's attitude, shook his head. "Not yet, Mr. Vaughn. The detectives will interrogate you again this morning." Ernest nodded, accepting the food tray. "Thank you. I'll be ready for them." On the other side of the city, Detective Megan Ortiz was already in her office, reviewing the notes she had taken during the night. Her desk was covered with papers, photographs and newspaper clippings on the wall. A large corkboard showed a complicated diagram of connections between the different actors in the Morgan case. Megan stood up and approached the board. Her eyes narrowed as she studied the connections. "Something doesn't add up," she muttered to herself. "Why would a homeless man with medical knowledge be in that precise place at that precise moment?" Her phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. It was Ryan Morgan. "Detective Ortiz," Ryan's voice sounded tense. "I need to see you as soon as possible. Victoria has remembered something important." "I'll be there in half an hour," Megan responded, already grabbing her coat and keys. In the Morgan mansion, Edward was preparing for the press conference. Lucy, his secretary, handed him a manila envelope. "Sir, here's the information you asked for about Ryan," she said quietly. Edward took the envelope with trembling hands. "Thank you, Lucy. No one must know about this, understood?" Lucy nodded solemnly. "Of course, sir. Your secret is safe with me." As Edward locked himself in his study to review the contents of the envelope, at the hospital, Megan Ortiz arrived at Victoria's room. Ryan greeted her at the door. "Detective, thank you for coming so quickly," he said, guiding her to Victoria's bed. Victoria, still unable to speak due to the tracheotomy, held her notebook. Megan approached and read what she had written. "The man who saved me, I recognized him. I saw him 2 days ago, giving a talk on traditional medicine at a community center. I gave him a donation after the talk." Megan frowned, her mind working at full speed. "This changes things," she muttered. "Ms. Morgan, are you sure about this?" Victoria nodded emphatically, and I wrote, "Completely sure. It can't be a coincidence." Ryan intervened, his voice laden with concern. "Detective, what does this mean? Do you think this man could have been following my sister?" Megan turned to him, her green eyes shining with determination. "Let's not jump to conclusions yet, Mr. Morgan, but I definitely need to talk to this man again." As she left the room, Megan couldn't help but notice Ryan's expression. There was something in his eyes, a mixture of concern and guilt. She made a mental note to investigate the victim's brother more thoroughly. Back at the police station, Detectives Ramirez and Smith were preparing for a new interrogation with Ernest Vaughn, but before they could begin, an officer rushed into the room. "Detectives," he said, breathless, "the results of the toxicological analysis have arrived, and there's something you need to see." Ramirez took the report, his eyes quickly scanning the pages. His expression changed from curiosity to surprise, and then to disbelief. "This can't be," he muttered. Smith leaned in to read over his shoulder. "What is it? What does it say?" Ramirez looked up, his face pale. "The substance found on Vaughn's clothes, it's not a poison, it's an antidote." Silence fell over the room as the detectives processed this new information. At that moment, the door opened again, and Megan Ortiz entered, her expression serious. "Detectives," she said, "we need to talk. There's new evidence that changes everything we thought we knew about this case." As the detectives gathered to discuss the new findings, in the Morgan mansion, Edward closed the envelope Lucy had given him, his face a mask of shock and pain. "My God, Ryan," he whispered, "what have you done?" The truth, hidden for so long, was beginning to come to light, and no one was prepared for the consequences it would bring. The conference room at the police station was buzzing with activity. Detectives Ramirez and Smith, along with Megan Ortiz, were heatedly discussing the new discoveries in the Morgan case. On a whiteboard, they had drawn a timeline with the known events so far. "Let's recap," said Megan, taking a marker. 2 days ago, Victoria Morgan attended a talk on traditional medicine at a community center. There she encountered Ernest Vaughn and gave him a donation. "And how do we know this is true?" Ramirez interrupted, skeptical. "I've confirmed it with the community center," Megan replied. "They have a record of the talk and several witnesses who saw Victoria there." Smith nodded, adding, "And the results of the toxicological analysis show that the substance on Vaughn's clothes was an antidote, not a poison." "Exactly," Megan continued. "Now, on the night of the incident, Vaughn appears casually at the right moment to save Victoria. But what if it wasn't a coincidence? What if Vaughn knew Victoria was in danger?" A thoughtful silence fell over the room as everyone processed this new theory. "But that would imply that Vaughn knew about the poisoning plan beforehand," said Ramirez, scratching his chin. "Precisely," Megan replied, "which leads us to the crucial question. Who else knew about the plan?" Meanwhile, at the hospital, Ryan entered Victoria's room, his face somber. Victoria, who had been scribbling in her notebook, looked up curiously. "Vic," Ryan began, his voice trembling. "There's something I need to confess to you." Victoria frowned, worried about her brother's tone. She took her notebook and wrote, "What's going on, Ryan?" Ryan sat heavily in the chair next to the bed, avoiding his sister's gaze. I knew about your allergy, the one that caused your reaction." Victoria's eyes widened, a mixture of shock and confusion in her gaze. She quickly wrote, "How? Even I didn't know about it." "It was years ago," Ryan continued, his voice barely a whisper. "When we were kids, you had a similar reaction after we visited that plantation in Brazil, remember? Dad made us swear we'd never mention it. He said it could affect the future of the company if people knew the heiress was allergic to one of our main raw materials." Victoria dropped the notebook, her mind reeling with this revelation. Ryan, unable to hold back the tears, continued. "Vic, I'm so sorry," Ryan continued, his voice broken with emotion. "I should have told you before, but Dad insisted it was better if you didn't know. He said you'd be safer that way, that no one could use that information against you." Victoria, still shocked by the revelation, picked up her notebook with trembling hands and wrote, "Dad knew all this time? Why did you hide it from me?" Ryan lowered his gaze, guilt evident on his face. Dad has always been very protective of you, Vic. You're his heir, the one who would carry on the company's legacy. I think he feared that if your allergy became known, you could lose credibility in the business world. Victoria shook her head, tears of frustration forming in her eyes. She wrote furiously, "That's ridiculous. My life was in danger and I didn't know it." I know, Ryan replied, running a hand through his hair. "And now, with everything that's happened, I can't help but think, what if someone else found out? What if that's why they tried to poison you?" At that moment, a knock on the door interrupted their conversation. It was Detective Megan Ortiz. "Excuse the interruption," said Megan, noticing the tension in the room. "Mr. Morgan, I need to ask you some additional questions." Ryan stood up, visibly nervous. "Of course, Detective. What is it about?" Megan looked at Victoria, who nodded, giving her permission for the conversation to continue in her presence. "Mr. Morgan, we've discovered that the substance found on Mr. Vaughan's clothes was actually an antidote, not a poison. This suggests that he knew about the poisoning attempt beforehand. Do you have any idea how he could have obtained that information?" Ryan visibly paled. "I have no idea. Are you sure about that?" Megan nodded, her sharp eyes observing every reaction from Ryan. "Completely sure. We've also confirmed that your sister met Mr. Vaughan 2 days before the incident. Did you know anything about this?" "No," Ryan replied. Quickly, perhaps too quickly. "I had no idea," Victoria, frustrated at not being able to participate verbally in the conversation, wrote something in her notebook and showed it to Megan. The detective read aloud, "Detective, I just found out I have a rare allergy. Ryan and my father knew about it for years, but hid it from me." Megan raised an eyebrow, surprised by this new information. "Mr. Morgan, is this true?" Ryan, cornered, nodded slowly. "Yes, it's true. But I swear, it has nothing to do with the poisoning attempt." "We'll determine that," Megan replied sternly. "Mr. Morgan, I'm afraid you'll need to come with me to the station for further questioning." As Ryan was escorted out of the room, Victoria wrote frantically in her notebook, "Detective, please find the truth. I don't know who to trust anymore." Megan nodded solemnly. "I'll do everything in my power, Ms. Morgan. I promise. You will get to the bottom of this." Meanwhile, in the Morgan mansion, Edward received an urgent call from Lucy. "Mr. Morgan," Lucy said, her voice tense, "I just received information that Ryan is being taken to the police station for questioning." Edward closed his eyes, feeling the weight of years of secrets on his shoulders. "I understand, Lucy. Prepare the car. It's time for me to face the consequences of my decisions." As Edward prepared to leave, he couldn't help but look at an old family photograph on his desk. In it, a younger Victoria, and Ryan smiled alongside their parents. "Forgive me," he whispered to the image, "for believing I could protect you by hiding the truth." At the police station, Ernest Vaughan waited patiently in his cell. When an officer approached to inform him that he would be interrogated again, Ernest simply nodded. "It's about time," he said, with a slight smile. "There's a lot I need to tell you." As the different threads of the story began to intertwine, it became clear that the attempt to poison Victoria Morgan was just the tip of the iceberg beneath the surface. A story of family secrets, frustrated ambitions, and old debts threatened to come to light. And at the center of it all, a mysterious homeless man with medical knowledge seemed to have the answers everyone was looking for. The truth was about to be revealed, and no one was prepared for the consequences it would bring. The interrogation room at the police station was silent, except for the soft hum of the air conditioning. Ryan Morgan sat rigidly in a metal chair, his hands clasped on the table in front of him. Across from him, Detective Megan Ortiz observed him with a penetrating gaze. "Mr. Morgan," Megan began, her voice calm but firm, "I need you to tell me everything you know about your sister's allergy and why it was kept secret for so many years." Ryan swallowed hard, his Adam's apple visibly moving. "As I told Victoria, it was years ago, during a family trip to Brazil. Victoria had a severe allergic reaction after visiting one of our plantations. The local doctors managed to stabilize her, but my father, he saw a threat in that weakness." "A threat?" asked Megan, leaning forward. To the future of the company, Ryan explained. You see, Detective, in our world, any sign of weakness can be exploited by the competition. My father feared that if it became known that the future heiress of Morgan Pharmaceuticals was allergic to one of our main raw materials, it could damage investor confidence. Megan nodded slowly, processing the information. And you agreed to keep this secret? Ryan lowered his gaze, guilt evident on his face. At the time, yes, I was young. I admired my father and believed he always knew what was best. But over time, I began to question it. Question it how? Megan pressed. I realized we were putting the company's interests above Victoria's health and safety, Ryan replied, his voice breaking slightly. I wanted to tell her, but my father, he has a way of making his decisions seem like the only right ones. At that moment, the door to the interrogation room burst open. Edward Morgan entered, followed closely by a man in a suit whom Megan recognized as one of the most expensive lawyers in the city. This interrogation ends now, the lawyer declared. My client will say nothing more without my presence. Megan stood up, her posture defiant. Mr. Morgan, this is an official interrogation. You can't just barge in here and I can and I will, Edward interrupted, his voice laden with authority. I'm Edward Morgan and I have crucial information for your investigation, but I'll only speak if my son is released immediately. Megan looked at Edward, then at Ryan, and finally at the lawyer. She knew she was in a delicate position. Very well, she finally said, but Mr. Ryan Morgan will remain under police surveillance, and you, Mr. Edward, will come with me for a formal interrogation. As Edward was escorted to another interrogation room, Ryan was released but ordered to remain at the police station. In the hallway, father and son exchanged a look laden with unexpressed emotions. In another part of the police station, Ernest Vaughn was being led to a different interrogation. Room detectives Ramirez and Smith were waiting for him, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. Mr. Vaughn, Ramirez began, we've discovered that the substance on your clothes was an antidote, not a poison. Would you like to explain how you obtained that information? Ernest smiled slightly, as if he had been expecting this question. Detectives, there's a lot you don't know about me and about the Morgan family, but before I tell you my story, I need you to understand one thing. Everything I've done has been to protect Victoria. Smith tilted her head, intrigued. Protect her? From whom? From her own family, Ernest replied, his voice laden with an old sadness. You see, many years ago I was the Morgan family's personal physician. I was there the day Victoria had her first allergic reaction in Brazil. I was the one who saved her that time. The detectives exchanged looks of surprise. Ramirez leaned forward, his interest palpable. Continue, Mr. Vaughn. It seems you have a lot to tell us, as Ernest began to unravel the complex story of the Morgan family. At the hospital, Victoria looked out the window of her room, her mind spinning with all the recent revelations. She took her notebook and began to write, determined to remember every detail of the last few days in her writing. Victoria couldn't help but notice how her life, which had always seemed so orderly and predictable, had turned into a chaos of secrets and lies. But amidst that chaos, one thing was becoming increasingly clear. The truth, as painful as it might be, was the only way forward. As night fell over New York City, the different actors in this family drama prepared to face the consequences of years of secrets and questionable decisions. The truth was about to come to light, and no one could predict how it would forever change their lives. Night had fallen over New York City, but activity at the police station didn't diminish. In 3 separate interrogation rooms, 3 stories converged into a truth that no one had fully anticipated. In the first room, Edward Morgan, the family patriarch, sat across from Detective Megan Ortiz. His posture, normally dominant, seemed to have lost some of its strength. Mr. Morgan, Megan began, I need you to tell me everything from the beginning. Edward sighed deeply, as if the weight of the years had finally caught up with him. It all started 25 years ago on that trip to Brazil. In the second room, Ryan Morgan was talking to Detectives Ramirez and Smith. I never wanted to harm Victoria, he insisted, his voice broken with emotion. but the pressure of being the second child, of never being good enough, it blinded me. And in the third room, Ernest Vaughan, the mysterious savior, was unraveling his own story before a group of astonished officers. "I was the Morgan family's doctor for years," he explained. "I watched Victoria and Ryan grow up. I loved them as if they were my own children. But Edward, he had other plans." As the three stories unfolded, a pattern began to emerge. A pattern of ambition, secrets, and fateful decisions that had led to this night. Edward revealed how, after the incident in Brazil, he had decided to hide Victoria's allergy, not only for the good of the company, but also to secure her position as heiress. Victoria was always the brightest, the most capable. He admitted, "I feared that if her weakness became known, Ryan might challenge her position." Ryan, for his part, confessed how years of resentment and jealousy had led him to consider the unthinkable. "I never wanted to kill her," he insisted through tears. I wanted Dad to see me, to consider me worthy. I thought if Victoria had a scare, if she seemed weak for a moment, maybe..." And Ernest, the silent guardian of the family's secrets, revealed how he had discovered Ryan's plan. "I never stopped watching over the family, even after Edward fired me for threatening to reveal the truth about Victoria's allergy. When I heard rumors about a possible attempt on her life, I knew I had to act." As the confessions flowed at the hospital, Victoria received an unexpected visit. Lucy, her father's secretary, entered the room with a determined expression on her face. "Miss Morgan," Lucy began, "there's something you need to know. Something I've kept for years out of loyalty to your father, but which I now see was a mistake." Victoria, still unable to speak, took her notebook and wrote, "What is it, Lucy?" Lucy took a deep breath before continuing. "Your father. He altered your grandfather's will. The real will divided the company equally between you and Ryan." Victoria's eyes widened at this revelation. She quickly wrote, "Do you have proof?" Lucy nodded, pulling an envelope from her purse. "I have copies of the original documents. I've kept them all these years, waiting for the right moment to reveal the truth." Victoria took the envelope with trembling hands, her mind reeling with this new information. She wrote quickly, "Why now? Why did you decide to tell me?" Lucy lowered her gaze, guilt evident on her face. "Because I've seen how this lie has poisoned your family for years, and after what happened to you, I can't continue to be complicit in this." As Victoria absorbed this new revelation at the police station, the pieces of the puzzle were finally falling into place. Megan Ortiz, meeting with her colleagues after the interrogations, traced the sequence of events on a whiteboard. "So this is what we have," she began. Edward Morgan hid Victoria's allergy and altered his father's will to ensure she would be the sole heir. This created a resentment in Ryan that grew over the years. Detective Ramirez nodded, continuing the narrative. Ryan, feeling undervalued and desperate for his father's approval, planned Victoria's poisoning not to kill her, but to make her appear weak and thus gain his father's trust. But he didn't count on Ernest Vaughan, added Detective Smith. The former family doctor who had been fired for wanting to reveal the truth about Victoria's allergy, Vaughan discovered Ryan's plan and prepared to intervene. Megan nodded, completing the picture. Vaughan attended the talk at the community center, knowing Victoria would be there. That's when he prepared the antidote on. The night of the poisoning, he was ready to act. The detectives looked at each other, taking in the complexity of the situation. "It's a web of lies and secrets that goes back decades," Ramirez commented, shaking his head. "And now we have to decide how to proceed," added Smith. "We have confessions, but also mitigating circumstances." Megan rubbed her temples, feeling the weight of the decision ahead of them. "We need to talk to the district attorney. This goes beyond a simple poisoning attempt. We're dealing with fraud, conspiracy, and who knows what else." As the detectives discussed their next steps at the hospital, Victoria finished reading the documents Lucy had given her. With tears in her eyes, she wrote in her notebook, "My whole life has been a lie." Lucy, moved by Victoria's pain, took her hand. "Not everything. Miss your intelligence, your compassion, your strength, that's all yours. No one can take that away from you." Victoria nodded slowly, grateful for the comfort. Then, with renewed determination, she wrote, "I need to talk to the police. It's time for the whole truth to come out." As the night progressed, the different threads of this complex story began to weave together into a tapestry of truth. At the police station, at the hospital, and in the hearts of all involved, a realization settled. Nothing would ever be the same again. Dawn was approaching, bringing with it the promise of a new day and, with it, the opportunity for redemption and reconciliation. But first, the Morgan family would have to face the consequences of years of secrets and lies. As the city slept, unaware of the drama unfolding in its bowels, the protagonists of this story prepared for the final act, an act that would determine not only the future of Morgan Pharmaceuticals, but also the fate of a family fractured by ambition and deception. The truth, so long buried, had finally come to light, and with it, the hope of a new beginning. The first rays of sun filtered through the blinds of the hospital room where Victoria Morgan was recovering. With the help of doctors, her tracheotomy had been removed, allowing her to speak for the first time since the incident. Her voice, though hoarse, was full of determination when Detective Megan Ortiz entered the room. "Detective," Victoria began, "I have something to show you." Megan approached the bed, where Victoria handed her the documents Lucy had provided the night before. As the detective reviewed them, her eyes widened in surprise. "This changes everything," Megan muttered. "Miss Morgan, are you willing to testify about this?" Victoria nodded firmly. "It's time for the truth to come out, regardless of the consequences." Meanwhile, at the police station, Edward and Ryan Morgan faced each other for the first time since their confessions. The atmosphere was charged with tension and remorse. "Dad," Ryan began, his voice broken, "I'm so sorry. I never meant for things to go this far." Edward, his face marked by the weight of his decisions, responded in a tired voice, "I'm sorry too, son. I failed you as a father. I failed all of us." Before they could continue, Detective Smith entered the room. "Gentlemen, the district attorney is here. She wants to speak with both of you." In another part of the city, Ernest Vaughn was being released from police custody. As he left the station, he came face to face with a group of people he didn't expect to see. His family. "How?" he began, but was interrupted by the embrace of a middle-aged woman. "His daughter. The detective found us," she explained through tears. "Dad, we've been looking for you for years." Ernest, overwhelmed with emotion, hugged his family, years of loneliness and regret dissolving in this moment of reunion. Back at the hospital, Victoria received another unexpected visit. Ryan, escorted by an officer, entered the room timidly. "Vic," he began, his eyes full of tears, "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I need you to know how sorry I am." Victoria observed her brother for a long moment before responding. "Ryan, what you did is unforgivable, but I also know that we've both been victims of Dad's lies." She extended her hand to him. "I can't forgive you yet, but I'm willing to try to understand and maybe, with time, rebuild our relationship." Ryan took her hand, sobbing softly. "Thank you, Vic. I'll do whatever it takes to earn your trust again." As the day progressed, news about the Morgan family scandal began to leak to the media. Morgan Pharmaceuticals was shaken by the controversy, with investors demanding answers. In a hastily convened press conference, Victoria, still weak but determined, appeared before the cameras. "For years our company has been built on lies and secrets," she began. "Today I'm here to put an end to that. From this moment on, Morgan Pharmaceuticals will operate with full transparency. My brother Ryan and I will share the management of the company, just as our grandfather had originally wished." The revelation caused a stir among the journalists present. Victoria continued. "Additionally, I announced the creation of a foundation dedicated to research on rare allergies and tropical diseases in honor of Ernest Vaughn, the man who saved my life and whose integrity has inspired us to be better." As Victoria spoke in different parts of the city, the other protagonists of this story watched the broadcast. Edward, in his cell, watched with a mixture of pride and remorse as his daughter took the reins of the situation he had created. Ryan, on probation, felt a spark of hope, seeing that his sister hadn't completely excluded him. Ernest, surrounded by his reunited family, smiled softly, feeling that he had finally fulfilled his promise to protect. Victoria and Megan Ortiz, in her office, nodded in approval, satisfied with having helped unravel the truth. Days later, as Victoria prepared to leave the hospital, she received one last visit. "It was Ernest's son, a young doctor named Alex. Miss Morgan," he began. "My father has told me everything. I wanted to thank you personally for honoring his legacy." Victoria smiled, noticing for the first time how handsome Alex was. "Please, call me Victoria, and there's nothing to thank me for. Your father is a hero." As they talked, a spark of connection ignited between them, perhaps promising the beginning of something new and beautiful. As Victoria left the hospital, supported by Alex, she felt she was taking her first steps not only towards physical recovery, but also towards a future full of possibilities. The truth had come to light, and although the road to healing would be long and difficult, Victoria knew they were finally on the right path. The Morgan family, though fractured, had the opportunity to rebuild itself on foundations of honesty and forgiveness. As the sun set over New York City, Victoria looked towards the horizon, feeling for the first time in a long time a sense of peace and hope. The future was uncertain, but she was ready to face it with courage and integrity. And so, with the twilight giving way to a starry night, a chapter in the life of the Morgan family closed and a new one began, full of promises of redemption, love, and a new dawn.